Let me say something that could completely change how you look at attraction, because once you hear this, you'll realize most of what you've been taught is the wrong way round. You've been told to look for desire in touch, in words, in how quickly someone moves towards you. But what if the strongest desire a man can feel shows up in the moments where he does nothing at all? What if the signs you've been chasing are actually the weakest ones, and the ones you've been ignoring are the most powerful? Think about this for a moment. Anyone can touch, anyone can flirt, anyone can say the right thing at the right time. That takes very little effort and even less depth, but not everyone can hold back. Not everyone can stay present without taking. Not everyone can sit with desire without trying to turn it into something instant. And that difference changes everything, because there is a kind of desire that rushes, and there is a kind of desire that watches. One is driven by impulse, the other is driven by intention. And if you don't know how to tell the difference, you can mistake intensity for meaning and end up feeling confused, anxious, and unsure of where you stand. What I'm about to share isn't about games or manipulation. It's about understanding the psychology behind real attraction, the kind that has weight, control, and direction, the kind that doesn't shout for your attention but quietly claims it, the kind that doesn't overwhelm you but makes you feel grounded, seen, and chosen. If you've ever wondered why some men feel exciting but unstable, while others feel calm yet deeply magnetic, there's a reason for that. And once you understand it, you'll stop chasing signals that lead nowhere and start recognizing the ones that actually matter. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you won't just see desire differently. You'll recognize it the moment it's real. Let's talk about restraint, because this is where most people completely misunderstand desire. We've been conditioned to believe that wanting someone means acting right away, leaning in, making a move, closing the gap as fast as possible. But that idea comes from a very shallow understanding of attraction. Real desire, the kind that has weight and intention behind it, doesn't behave that way. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't grab. It steadies itself. When a man's desire is strong, he becomes more controlled, not less. And that sounds backwards until you really think about it. Anything weak reacts instantly. Anything strong can wait. Hunger lunges, discipline chooses. Desire that is fragile needs constant release. Desire that is powerful can sit inside the tension without breaking it. Here's the psychological truth most people never hear. Restraint is not the absence of desire, it is the management of it. When a man feels something deeply, he becomes aware of the value of the moment, and value changes behavior. You don't rush something you respect. You don't cheapen something you care about. You slow down because you don't want to damage what you feel forming. This is why the most intense attraction often shows up as stillness. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't fill silence with noise. He doesn't perform for attention. He's composed, present, and deliberate. Not because he's unsure, but because he's aware. He knows that every action carries weight, and he chooses carefully. Weak attraction is noisy. It's obvious. It's impatient. It wants proof right now. Strong desire is quiet but focused. It watches, it listens, it calibrates. It's thinking not just about the next moment, but about what comes after it. And this matters because when a man restrains himself, he's revealing something important about how he relates to power. He's showing that he doesn't need to take in order to feel strong. He doesn't need to cross boundaries to feel validated. He can sit with the pull he feels and remain grounded. That's emotional maturity. That's self-command. There's a philosophical idea that real power is not the ability to act, but the ability to choose when not to. Anyone can react to impulse. That takes no discipline. But to feel something intensely and still decide how and when to act requires awareness. It requires intention. It requires respect for the other person and for oneself. This is why restraint creates tension instead of killing attraction. Tension exists when something is held back on purpose. When desire is unmanaged, it spills everywhere and loses its edge. When it's contained, it sharpens. actions. It becomes felt in eye contact, in pacing, in silence, in the space between words. You can feel it without it ever being spoken. And that's the moment people often misread. They assume that if someone isn't making a move, they must not want it enough. But often the opposite is true. He wanted it enough to not risk mishandling it. He wanted it enough to not reduce it to something casual. He wanted it enough to protect the connection before it even had a name. There's also something deeper happening internally. When a man restrains himself, he's not just managing desire. He's weighing meaning. He's asking, consciously or not, is this something I want to build or something I just want to consume? Restraint signals that the answer isn't trivial. It signals that what he feels carries consequence. This is why men with strong desire often appear calmer, slower, more intentional around the person they want most. Their nervous system isn't in fight or flight, it's regulated. And regulation is attractive because it feels safe without feeling dull. It feels solid, anchored, present. Think about how different that feels from someone who rushes. Rushing creates pressure. Pressure creates anxiety. Anxiety creates confusion. Restraint creates clarity. It gives space for curiosity. It allows attraction to unfold instead of forcing it into a shape too early. And here's the part that's uncomfortable but necessary to say. A man who cannot restrain himself is not demonstrating desire. He's demonstrating a lack of self-governance. That may feel exciting at first, but it rarely feels secure. Because if he cannot control himself with you, he likely cannot control himself without you. And that instability always shows up later. Strong desire doesn't try to own you quickly. It doesn't try to collapse distance too soon. It respects the process because it understands that connection has stages, and skipping them weakens what comes next. Restraint is how desire proves it's willing to earn, not just take. And when you experience this kind of restraint, you feel it in your body. You feel grounded, not rushed, seen, not pressured, wanted, but not overwhelmed. There's a sense that something is building rather than being taken. That's not accidental. That's the result of someone choosing control over impulse. This is also why restraint is often mistaken for disinterest by people who equate intensity with speed. But intensity doesn't live in motion alone, It lives in focus. It lives in consistency. It lives in the ability to stay present without needing resolution. A man who restrains himself is saying, without words, I can hold this. I don't need to rush it to feel powerful. And that message lands deeply, even if it isn't consciously recognized. So when you're judging desire, stop asking how far someone moves. Start asking how intentionally they don't. Because restraint is not a lack of attraction. It's attraction that knows its own strength. And here's the truth to take with you. Anyone can act on desire, but only someone who truly values it knows when to wait. Now, let's talk about presence, because this is where desire becomes unmistakable without ever being loud. In a world where attention is fragmented, where everyone is half listening and half elsewhere, presence has become one of the rarest signals of value. And when a man desires you strongly, his presence changes in a way you can feel before you can explain it. Undivided presence is not just politeness. It is not good manners. It is not social skill. It is psychological investment. When a man gives you his full attention, what he is really saying is, you are more important to me right now than every competing distraction. And that is not accidental. That is a choice. Most people are physically present but mentally scattered. Their eyes drift. Their phone pulls them away. Their thoughts jump ahead to what they'll say next. But when desire is strong, that scattering disappears. His attention narrows. His energy settles. He's not scanning the room, not multitasking, not performing. He's with you. And that with you feeling is powerful because attention is the currency of meaning. We give our attention to what we value. We protect our attention when something matters. So when a man offers you steady, calm, unbroken attention, he is showing his priorities without needing to say them out loud. This kind of presence creates a different emotional climate. Conversations slow down. Silences feel comfortable instead of awkward. You don't feel rushed to impress or entertain. You feel listened to. And being listened to is deeply intimate because it signals that your inner world matters matters. Psychologically, this does something profound. When someone listens fully, your nervous system relaxes. You feel safe enough to be more yourself. You share more honestly. You open up without realizing you're opening. And that depth of exchange is not something casual attraction produces. Casual interest stays on the surface. Strong desire wants to understand what's underneath. Here's where people often get it wrong. They think presence is passive. They think it means sitting quietly and saying very little. But real presence is active. It's engaged. It's responsive. It's when a man remembers what you said 10 minutes ago and builds on it. It's when he asks questions that aren't scripted, questions that come naturally from curiosity, not strategy. That curiosity is key. Desire that is shallow wants quick confirmation. Desire that is deep wants context. It wants to know how you think, how you see the world, what shaped you, because the more he understands you, the more real you become to him. And reality is what desire attaches to when it's strong. This is also why undivided presence feels different from charm. Charm can be impressive, but it often feels rehearsed. Presence feels grounded. You don't feel like you're being sold to. You feel like you're being met, and being met is far more powerful than being impressed. There's a philosophical idea that to truly see someone is an ethical act. It requires humility. It requires slowing down enough to let another person exist fully in front of you without rushing them into a role you've already decided they should play. When a man desires you strongly, he doesn't project as much. He observes. He lets you show him who you are. And that restraint in perception mirrors the restraint in action we talked about earlier. Presence is not about taking space. It's about holding space. Holding space means he's not trying to dominate the interaction. He's not steering it aggressively. He's letting it unfold. That creates equality, and equality creates trust. Trust is not built through intensity alone. It's built through consistency of attention. When someone shows you again and again that when they are with you, they are actually with you, your mind starts to relax into the connection. You stop questioning their motives. You stop bracing for withdrawal. You feel stable. This is why presence often comes before commitment. Before someone commits with words, they commit with attention. They show up mentally before they show up verbally. And if you know how to recognize it, that presence tells you more than grand declarations ever could. There's also something important to understand about what presence costs. Attention is limited. When a man gives it to you fully, he is choosing not to give it elsewhere. That choice has a cost, and people only pay that cost willingly when something matters to them. So if a man consistently gives you focused attention, not just once, but over time, that's not coincidence. That's prioritization. And prioritization is desire showing itself through behavior rather than promises. Now, here's the subtle but critical distinction. Undivided presence does not feel anxious. It doesn't feel clingy. It doesn't feel like he needs something from you in that moment. It feels calm, grounded, secure, because true presence comes from fullness, not neediness. When someone is present because they need validation, you feel pressure. When someone is present because they are genuinely interested, you feel ease. The energy is different. One pulls from you, the other meets you. And this is why presence is such a reliable signal. It's very hard to fake consistently. Anyone can perform interest briefly. Few can sustain real attention over time without genuine desire behind it. Eventually, the mind wonders if the heart isn't invested. This is also why your body often recognizes the presence before your mind does. You feel more relaxed, more open, more grounded. You don't feel like you're chasing clarity. You feel like clarity is being offered through behavior. In a distracted world, presence is intimacy. It says, I choose this moment with you. And when a man makes that choice again and again without demanding anything in return, he is communicating something powerful and unmistakable. So don't underestimate the man who listens more than he speaks, who remembers more than he promises, who stays mentally when others drift away. That quiet focus is not the absence of desire. It is desire refined into attention. And here is the reflection to carry forward. Pay less attention to who excites you briefly and more attention to who shows up fully, because the strongest desire doesn't shout for your attention. It offers you its own. Now we come to the part most people misunderstand the most because it looks quiet from the outside, but it is actually one of the strongest signs of real desire. When a man's desire is deep, he is not trying to pull validation from you. He is not chasing reassurance. He is not constantly checking whether he is wanted. Instead, he becomes curious, oriented toward connection rather than confirmation. This matters because desire that needs validation is unstable. It depends on constant feedback to survive. It asks, do you like me? Am I enough? Am I winning? That kind of desire can feel intense, but it's rooted in insecurity. And insecurity always makes desire self-centered because the focus is on calming one's own doubts rather than understanding the other person. When a man truly desires you, his attention moves outward, not inward. He's not preoccupied with how he's coming across. He's interested in who you are. He asks questions not to impress, not to steer things toward a result, but because he genuinely wants to know how your mind works. And there is a very different energy when someone wants to understand you rather than be approved of by you. Psychologically, this is a shift from ego-driven attraction to relational attraction. Ego-driven attraction is about being chosen. Relational attraction is about choosing to know. One is anxious, the other is steady. One seeks reassurance, the other seeks depth. You can feel this difference almost right away. With validation-seeking desire, conversations circle back to him. His achievements, his opinions, his worth, even his compliments are often a transaction, offered with the hope of something in return. With deep desire, the spotlight doesn't keep snapping back. He stays curious. He follows threads. He remembers what you said last time and brings it up naturally because it mattered enough to stay with him. Memory is one of the most overlooked signs of desire. We remember what we value. We forget what we skim. When a man recalls small details about you, not as a performance, but as a natural continuation of attention, it tells you something important. Your inner world is being kept, not just noticed, and keeping it requires care. This is also where respect for boundaries becomes deeply revealing. A man who desires you deeply does not see your boundaries as obstacles. He sees them as information. He notices where you hesitate, where you slow down, where you need space. And instead of pushing, he adjusts. That adjustment is not a lack of desire. It is desire guided by respect. There's a philosophical idea that love in its earliest form begins as the willingness to let someone be who they are, rather than who you want them to be for you. When a man desires you strongly, he does not rush to shape you into a role that serves him. He lets you exist fully, even when that means risking that you may not choose him back. And this is where the real courage lies, because seeking validation is safe. You only move forward when you feel assured. But seeking connection without guarantees takes emotional strength. It requires tolerating uncertainty. It requires accepting that desire does not entitle you to possession. This is why a man with deep desire is often surprisingly calm. He is not bargaining with the moment. He is not trying to control the outcome. He is present, curious, and open. And openness includes vulnerability, and vulnerability, when chosen rather than forced, is a sign of confidence, not weakness. There is also a long-term view hidden here. Validation-seeking desire is short-sighted. It wants an immediate payoff. Connection-seeking desire thinks in terms of continuity. It asks, is this something I want to build? Not, what can I get right now? And that view quietly changes behavior. It slows things down. It deepens conversations. It puts the two of you ahead of urgency. This is why a man who desires you deeply will often respect you even when it costs him something. He may hold back words. He may delay action. He may choose honesty over advantage. And that choice tells you that what he values is not just the feeling of desire, but the integrity of the connection itself. You'll notice that with this kind of desire, you don't feel managed. You don't feel talked into anything. You don't feel like the interaction is following a script. You feel met where you are. And being met is powerful because it lets you show up honestly rather than defensively. There is also something deeply steadying about not being used as a mirror for someone else's self-worth. When a man does not need you to constantly reassure him, you are free to be yourself rather than a keeper of his confidence. That freedom creates attraction in its own right because it lets the connection breathe. This is the paradox people often miss. The less a man needs validation from you, the more space there is for real desire to grow, because desire thrives on mutual choice, not emotional pressure. It deepens when both people are present by choice, not out of fear of losing approvals. So when you're trying to understand what a man's behavior really means, stop focusing on how much he chases reassurance. Start noticing how much he seeks understanding. Notice whether he listens to learn or listens to reply. Notice whether he respects your boundaries even when it would be easier not to. Notice whether he is willing to risk uncertainty rather than manufacture certainty, because desire that is strong does not cling. It does not demand proof. It does not rush to secure itself. It stands steady and says, through behavior rather than words, I want to know you, not just be wanted by you. And that is the desire worth responding to, because anyone can crave validation, but only someone grounded enough to seek connection is capable of building something real.